We have a clip from the film, and it shows him outside his hospital, and it's pretty telling because he's mistaken, not for a top scientist, but because of his symptoms, for a homeless guy. Let's take a look.
He always says he needs to get his vitamin D, so he sits outside of the hospital to have his lunch. And I think on more than one occasion, he's been taken indoors by security. And I jokingly say that I think people think that he's a homeless person out there. And he tells them, well, I work here, and they just kind of look at him, and they have to check out whether he really is someone that works in the hospital. This is another one of our sort of standing jokes about his appearance. You can't change it, so you might as well accept it and make light of it if you can.
The resilience of the human spirit was shown over and over again in this film. What about their children, the Roeder's kids?
Well, they had 2 children, 2 adult children. Their daughter was tested first, and happily she doesn't have the gene. But an interesting story concerned his son, his only son, who has schizophrenia. And both him and his wife tried to discourage the son from being tested because they felt it would be too much.
Right.
That if he had the gene, it would be too much for him to cope with along with his schizophrenia. But the son went ahead because he wanted to know, got tested, and the very happy news is that he doesn't have the gene either.
Very
so
happy
Dr.
news.
Roeder will be the last member of his family after generations to have Huntington's.
And to watch your father or your mother suffer from this and know what's coming, very clearly what's coming. And in their case, when they had children, they hadn't discovered the gene, so there was no way to test for it. So it was really like shooting ducks in a pond, whether or not your kids would have it. Should you take the out? Should you have children? There's so many questions.
Absolutely. But the discovery of the gene and the testing that is now possible does make it a lot easier in a way for people who have the gene to have children nowadays through an extraordinary procedure called pre-implantation genetic diagnosis.
I had a top IVF guy on yesterday, and we were talking about that. If you have a hereditary disease, an Alport syndrome, a Huntington, something that comes down, they can test the egg, and you can have implantation, and they cannot implant an egg that has the gene.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
Exactly.
Young man at UBC.
Wonderful guy.
Wonderful guy. Tell me about him.
Jeff Carroll, who was at risk for Huntington's, and when he learned that his mother had Huntington's, he was at the time a high school dropout serving in the U.S. Army. He completed his high school degree, enrolled as an undergraduate at UBC in biology so that he could get his science background. And at the age of 25, he was tested. And of course, I shouldn't say of course, but he learned that he had the gene. And his reaction to that was just extraordinary. Instead of collapsing or feeling sorry for himself, Jeff immediately asked for a job in the research lab at UBC, which is studying Huntington's, and which is one of the foremost labs in the world. And
I learned that from the film, that the UBC Huntington's research lab is right at the top.
Right at the very, very top.
So he has the gene, he researches, he's on his way, let's hope,
we hope
to find some answers.
To either find a treatment or a cure. He completed his PhD at UBC in researching Huntington's, and then was awarded a postdoctoral fellowship at Harvard Medical School in the lab that was co-founder of the gene itself.
And as you know so well, having done this, that it's an agonizing decision.
Oh.
And it's your decision. And you can tell people or not tell people. You have to talk to your spouse, obviously, before you get married. It's fair if you say, by the way, our family has HD, there's a chance we will pass that down to our children, 50-50. Today, easier with the genetic testing, I would think, but you know how some of us are ostriches.
Yeah,
And
well,
we just don't want to know.
I'm not critical of people who don't
No.
want to be tested because, you know, I mean, how many of us do have the courage to face those kind of truths, you know, and
Right.
to live with those truths.
And anybody who's been diagnosed with a cancer diagnosis or something that devastates you, you know you don't hear a word to begin with, right? And you're never prepared.
No.
And the reaction is sometimes so complex, and you saw it in the documentary.
Absolutely.
There's anger, there's fear.
Absolutely. And this documentary is about Huntington's and genetic testing for it. This is a question, do you really want to know?
Right.
That we all increasingly will all be facing that question, whether it's about Huntington's or whether it's about Alzheimer's or breast cancer in the case
Right.
of women,
Yes.
whatever. We all will have to decide, do we want to know or not?
Yes, and one of the people in the documentary, I can't remember who it was, female, she said, not knowing may be scarier than living with a yes.
Well, that's the
'Cause
other
how
part
do
of
you
it.
get it out
because
of your brain?
If you don't get tested, then you'll spend the rest of your life with that uncertainty, with that fear that maybe I do have the gene, and always be checking yourself out for the slightest symptom
Yes.
of it.
Right.
And where if you do get tested, and if you're lucky and you don't have the
Sure.
gene, you can put it to rest.
And as you know, it's a family disease in more ways than one, in that if your mother has it or your father has it, you have to be with them and watch them deteriorate and watch them decide
That's, I
when
think,
it's time.
I mean, that's the hardest part of the whole Huntington situation. And, you know, it's I hope, a film that will raise public awareness of Huntington's. I think so few people really
Yes.
even know about Huntington's, and
Well, it's a beautiful film, and it's a tough film to watch in a way, but with the music, with how you put it together, it's okay, because it, in my humble
not
opinion,
nearly depressing as you thought.
not as depressing as I thought it would be. No, it was enlightening, and it helps me recognize what I would do if indeed I have a gene that's not quite right.
Well, thank you so much.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you really want to know? John Zaritsky will be